It was supposed to be the happiest day of his life, but instead, it became the most humiliating. Jasmine stood outside the grand ballroom, the lavish decorations gleaming under the chandeliers, the soft hum of conversation drifting through the walls. Her hands clenched the edges of the invitation, the same invitation that had been sent to her, the woman who had once been Jonathan Parker's wife, the woman he had left for someone else. The gold lettering seemed to mock her, but she didn't flinch. No, today, she was not that woman, weak and heartbroken. She had rebuilt herself from the ashes of her past. Now, she was the woman who would make him regret everything. With each step she took toward the entrance, her heart raced, but not with fear. No, it was something else, something much stronger, power. As she entered, she could feel all eyes turned toward her, whispers spreading through the room. She was no longer the discarded wife. She was a force of nature. Dressed in a stunning red dress that hugged her frame, Jasmine felt every inch of the woman she had become. The dress wasn't just fabric, it was armor. The room grew quieter with every step, the tension thickening. Jonathan stood at the front with Rebecca, his new fiancée, beaming with pride. But when he saw Jasmine walk in, holding twins in her arms, his face faltered. It was a moment of utter disbelief. The room was stunned into silence. He thought he had won, thought he could leave her behind, replace her with someone new, someone younger. But Jasmine wasn't the same woman he had left. She was stronger now, more confident than ever before. She walked through the room with a calm that contrasted the storm building inside her. The guests couldn't take their eyes off her, some still whispering, others unsure how to react. And then, as she reached the front, where Jonathan stood frozen in shock, she did what no one expected. She slapped him. It wasn't a frantic act of rage, but a measured move, a statement. Her palm met his cheek with a resounding sound that echoed in the room. Jonathan's eyes widened as he stumbled back, the sting of her hand only matched by the weight of her gaze. The guests held their breath, unsure whether to gasp or applaud. Jasmine didn't speak. She didn't need to. The slap said everything. She had taken back her power, her dignity, and she would never let him diminish her again. Jonathan, standing there humiliated, tried to recover, his face red with anger and shock, but it was too late. The damage was done. He had lost her, not just as a wife, but as a woman who had the strength to move on and thrive without him. Jasmine turned, the twins in her arms a symbol of everything she had gained while Jonathan had only lost. With grace, she walked out of the room, the sound of her heels clicking against the marble floor marking the beginning of a new chapter in her life, one where she would no longer be anyone's second choice. The days following Jasmine's unexpected appearance at Jonathan's wedding were filled with an eerie calm. She had returned home to a place that no longer felt like home. The penthouse she had once shared with Jonathan felt foreign now. The walls that had witnessed their love, their dreams, their plans, now stood as silent witnesses to the ruins of her past. Jasmine sat by the window, the city lights shimmering below, her reflection a reminder of the strength she had gained. She no longer felt the sting of betrayal, but instead, a sense of freedom washed over her. For the first time in years, Jasmine was at peace. The twins, now 3 years old, played in the corner, their laughter filling the room with a warmth that hadn't existed before. They were the light that guided her through the darkest days, the reason she had fought so hard to rebuild her life. She had left Jonathan behind, but they were her future. She had never imagined that life could feel so full again. But now, as she looked out over the city, Jasmine knew it was time to take the next step. She had left Jonathan, yes, but she had also left behind a life that no longer served her. The woman who had walked into his wedding, calm and composed, was not the woman who had once cried herself to sleep every night, wondering where it had all gone wrong. She was stronger now, and her journey was only beginning. The following weeks were a blur of activity. Jasmine focused on her career, something she had neglected during her marriage. She had always been capable, but Jonathan's demands had pulled her in so many directions that she had lost sight of her own aspirations. Now, her days were filled with meetings, phone calls, and the satisfaction of achieving things on her own terms. She felt the weight of her own potential, something she had almost forgotten existed. As she sat in her office, working late one evening, her phone buzzed. A message from her brother, Travis, popped up on the screen. Jasmine, I think it's time we take things to the next level. Are you ready? She stared at the message, her mind racing. Travis had always been her rock, the one person who had never doubted her, even when she had doubted herself. Together, they had built something that no one could take away from them, self-respect. Travis's message was a reminder that there was still more to be done. Her life had been shattered, but now she was piecing it back together, brick by brick. She was no longer just Jonathan's wife. She was Jasmine Williams, a woman who had fought for her future and had come out stronger on the other side. But there was something more to this journey, something that had been brewing beneath the surface. A new opportunity. Travis had connections, powerful ones. And Jasmine knew that if she played her cards right, she could take the world by storm. She was no longer hiding in the shadows of Jonathan's success. It was time for her to step into the spotlight. That night, as she stood in front of the mirror, Jasmine's reflection showed a woman who had shed the remnants of her past. The red dress she wore symbolized her transformation, a woman reborn, ready to conquer whatever came her way. The path ahead was uncertain, but Jasmine was no longer afraid. She had walked away from the man who had betrayed her, and now she was walking toward her future. As she drove through the city, the skyline in front of her seemed to mirror her journey. Tall buildings reaching toward the sky, strong and unyielding, just like her. The pain of the past would always be there, but it no longer defined her. Jasmine was ready to claim her place in the world, not as someone's wife, but as a force in her own right. The days that followed were filled with a mix of determination and quiet reflection. Jasmine had stepped away from the wreckage of her past, but now she was standing on the edge of something new, something far bigger than she had ever imagined. Every day felt like a small victory, and she held on to those moments with both hands. The city around her seemed to mirror her own transformation, towering buildings reaching for the sky, their foundations firm, unshakable. She had once been like those fragile walls that had crumbled under the weight of betrayal, but now, she was one of those structures, strong and rising again. Jasmine had begun to rebuild her life, brick by brick. The more she focused on herself, the more she realized how much she had been holding back, how much she had let slip through her fingers while she had been focused on Jonathan and his world. She didn't need that world anymore. She had her own now. Her career was thriving. She was finally on a path where she could lead, not follow. Her brother Travis, ever her pillar, had been by her side, quietly encouraging her to step into the spotlight, to claim the power that had always been inside her. And so she did. She started making moves in the business world, attending high-profile meetings, gaining the respect she deserved. The same people who once looked at her with sympathy now watched her with admiration. Jasmine wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. But it wasn't just her professional life that was blossoming. It was her personal life as well. The twins had grown, their personalities shining through more each day. They were no longer the babies who had been a part of her heartbreak. They were her strength. They were her reason for living, for growing, for becoming the woman she was meant to be. And then came the night that would change everything. Jasmine was at a charity gala, a gathering of the city's elite. She stood across the room, surrounded by people she had once only dreamed of being a part of. The soft glow of chandeliers bathed the room in a golden light, and Jasmine felt like she belonged there. As she stood, a glass of champagne in hand, she couldn't help but smile. She had come a long way from the woman who had been left standing in the cold, abandoned and betrayed. She was no longer the one left behind. Now she was the one with the power. And then, as if fate had decided it wasn't done with her yet, she saw him. Jonathan. He stood by the door, his eyes scanning the room, and for the first time in what felt like years, he looked directly at her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Time seemed to stretch out. And then, his expression shifted, recognition, shock, and regret all flooding his face. Jasmine stood her ground, unshaken, unflinching. She didn't need to speak. His eyes said it all. The man who had once been everything to her, the man who had broken her, now stood before her, dwarfed by her strength. He took a tentative step toward her, as if trying to bridge the gap between them, but Jasmine didn't move. She simply waited, her gaze steady, her presence commanding. When he reached her, he opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was a man undone, standing before the woman he had once thought he could destroy. Jasmine looked at him, but there was no anger in her eyes, no bitterness. There was only peace. She had let go of the past, and now she was free. Jonathan stood there, searching for something to say, but Jasmine was already looking away. She wasn't going to waste any more of her time on him. She had built a life without him, and now she was moving forward. She turned to walk away, the soft rustle of her dress the only sound in the quiet room. As she stepped into the future, she knew that she was leaving behind a past that no longer defined her. She was Jasmine Williams, and she was unstoppable. The city lights flickered in the distance as Jasmine sat in her office late at night, a soft glow illuminating the sleek, modern space. It had been months since that unforgettable gala, where she had seen Jonathan again, and each passing day had only confirmed what she already knew. She was no longer tethered to the past. Her life was now her own, and it was more than she had ever dared to hope for. The partnership with the company she had secured was thriving, her reputation in the industry growing, and the twins, now flourishing, filled her heart with joy that was indescribable. But even with everything falling into place, there was still something missing, a sense of completion that she hadn't found in her career or in her personal growth. It wasn't until that evening, as she stared out the window at the city, that she realized what it was. She had come so far, building a career, reclaiming her strength, and creating a life for herself. But deep down, there was still a part of her that longed for a deeper connection, a new chapter. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence of her thoughts. It was Travis, her brother, as always, the one person who had never doubted her, the one who had always seen the potential within her. "It's time." The message read, simple but loaded with meaning. Jasmine had grown used to Travis's quiet support, but this was different. It was a call to action. "Let's take it to the next level," he had written before, and now it was clear that the time had come. Jasmine smiled to herself. She had always known that her brother was right. She had come so far, but now it was time for something bigger, something beyond just surviving. She was ready to embrace the life that had been waiting for her all along, the life she had fought for but had not yet fully claimed. After reading the message, Jasmine stood and walked over to the large window of her office. The city below was alive with movement, the hum of possibility in the air. In that moment, she realized that she was no longer just a woman who had been wronged, a woman who had rebuilt herself from the ashes of a broken marriage. She was someone who was capable of greatness. The path ahead of her was still uncertain, but she knew that she was more than capable of handling whatever came next. She had the strength, the resolve, and the will to see it through. It wasn't just about Jonathan anymore. It was about Jasmine Williams, the woman who had fought, the woman who had endured, and the woman who was about to take the world by storm. She had learned that her true power lay not in holding on to the past, but in letting go of what no longer served her and stepping into the future with open arms. Jasmine took a deep breath, savoring the moment of clarity. She had come a long way, but now she was ready for the next chapter. It was time to trust herself completely, to step into her power without hesitation. No more holding back. She knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she was prepared. She was no longer afraid to take risks, to pursue the life she truly wanted. And so, with a newfound sense of purpose, Jasmine made a decision. She was going to take the next step, whatever it may be. She was going to rise, not just as a successful businesswoman or a mother, but as a force of nature in her own right. This was only the beginning, and the world was hers for the taking. It had been a month since Jasmine made the decision to take the next step. The feeling of anticipation lingered in the air, filling every corner of her life. She had risen from the rubble of her past, but now, she was stepping into a future that was all her own. Her career was flourishing, the twins were thriving, and her bond with Travis remained unbreakable. But something inside her stirred, a desire for something more. The past few years had been a journey of rebuilding, of finding strength in herself, but now, it was time to embrace the next chapter fully. There was an unspoken promise within her heart that she would not only survive, but thrive in ways she had never imagined. The city outside her apartment was a living, breathing testament to the life she had built. The skyline gleamed with possibility, and for the first time in years, Jasmine truly felt like she belonged. She was no longer a woman who had been cast aside, waiting for someone else to validate her. She had become her own validation, her own source of strength. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Travis. I've set everything up for tomorrow. Are you ready? Jasmine smiled. Travis had always been the one to push her, the one who saw potential in her before she ever saw it in herself. He had encouraged her to take this step, to stop being passive and start actively shaping her destiny. Tomorrow would be the day that changed everything. It was time to let go of the last remnants of the past and fully embrace the future. The next morning, Jasmine woke up early, a sense of excitement humming in her veins. She walked over to the large mirror in her bedroom, looking at the woman who had come so far. The woman who had left behind a marriage that had nearly broken her, who had rebuilt her life from the ground up, who was now stepping into a new world, not as someone's wife, but as her own person. She smiled at her reflection. There was no more fear, no more doubt. She had everything she needed. The day was hers. She put on a simple yet elegant outfit, something that matched the new version of herself. Confident, capable, and powerful. She wasn't just ready for the day. She was ready for the life that was waiting for her. When Jasmine arrived at the venue, it was everything she had imagined and more. The air buzzed with energy, the hum of excitement filling the space. She felt like she was walking into a new world, a world where she was in control. The doors opened, and she walked inside, her head held high. For the first time in her life, she wasn't looking over her shoulder, wondering if she was good enough. She knew she was. The people in the room recognized her now, not as Jonathan's ex-wife, but as Jasmine Williams, a woman who had made her mark and was only just beginning. The room quieted as she entered, but Jasmine didn't falter. She walked with purpose, her steps confident, steady. As she moved through the crowd, the whispers followed her. They didn't intimidate her anymore. She had heard whispers her entire life. Whispers about her being too weak, too passive, not enough. But those whispers were long gone, replaced by the sound of her own heartbeat. She had built this life on her own, and now, she was here to claim the next piece of it. She spotted Travis across the room, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. He gave her a small nod, his silent way of letting her know that she had made it. And she had. This was it. Jasmine smiled, feeling the weight of the moment settle in her chest. This wasn't just a victory for her. It was a statement to everyone who had ever doubted her. She had taken control of her life, and no one, not even Jonathan, could take that away from her. As she stood in the center of the room, surrounded by people who now recognized her power, Jasmine felt a sense of peace. She had come full circle. The woman who had once been left behind, discarded, was now standing in her own light, ready to shine even brighter. The future was wide open, and she was walking toward it with no hesitation. As the days turned into weeks, Jasmine's life settled into a rhythm that was both comforting and exhilarating. She had achieved more than she could have imagined in such a short time, but there was still a part of her that longed for something more. She had filled the void that Jonathan had left with success, independence, and love for her children, but the world outside her office still seemed vast, as if there were pieces of her life yet to be claimed. It was one of those late afternoons when she found herself staring at the city below, the soft hum of the streets beneath her office window, reminding her of how much she had accomplished, yet how much still remained to be done. Her phone buzzed on the desk, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from Travis. "You're ready for the next chapter, right?" Jasmine smiled to herself. Travis had always known how to push her when she needed it the most. She had reached a point where she knew her next step had to be about more than just work. The business was thriving, the twins were growing, and she had proven to herself that she could handle anything that life threw her way. But there was still a yearning, something inside her that hadn't been fully satisfied. She had walked into Jonathan's wedding that day and taken back her power, but now it was time to take back something else, her belief in love, in the kind of love she had once hoped for but never found. It was time to start a new journey, one that wasn't defined by her past, but by the woman she was becoming. Jasmine took a deep breath, letting the weight of the moment settle over her. She wasn't just moving forward. She was choosing the direction. She picked up her phone and typed a quick response. "Yes, I'm ready." The next day, Travis had arranged a meeting with a potential partner, a company that had reached out to her because they recognized her strength, her vision. They wanted to work with her, but Jasmine knew that this opportunity was more than just a business deal. It was a chance for her to step even further into the world she had dreamed of, a world where she wasn't just seen as someone's ex-wife or a mother, but as a powerful force in her own right. As she prepared for the meeting, Jasmine couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. She had once been a woman broken by betrayal, left behind, uncertain of her worth. But now, she was a woman who had found her strength, who had learned to trust herself again, who was ready to take on the world. When the meeting began, Jasmine was all business. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She laid out her vision clearly, confidently, her voice steady and assured. The people across from her saw it instantly, the same power, the same drive that had made her successful in everything she had done. She wasn't just there to make deals. She was there to take ownership of her future, to shape it the way she wanted. By the end of the meeting, the deal was practically sealed. Jasmine had done it again. She had proven to herself, once more, that she was capable of anything. As she left the building, her heart light, she felt a sense of contentment wash over her. The city stretched out in front of her, endless and full of possibilities. She wasn't just existing anymore. She was living. She was free. For the first time in years, Jasmine realized that her future wasn't defined by what had happened to her. It was defined by what she was going to do next. The next chapter was hers to write, and she was going to make it the best one yet. The weeks that followed were filled with moments of quiet celebration and reflection. Jasmine had not only closed the deal with her new business partners, but she had also begun to truly feel the weight of her success. Every meeting, every decision, seemed to build on the last. It was clear to everyone around her that she was no longer just a survivor of her past. She was thriving, stepping confidently into a future she had once only dreamed about. She had earned her place in the world, and the world was starting to recognize her for it. As she sat in her office, reviewing plans for her upcoming projects, a familiar face appeared at the door. It was Travis, his warm smile and easy confidence putting her at ease instantly. "You did it," he said, stepping into the room. His pride in her was evident, and Jasmine couldn't help but smile back. She had come so far, but it was moments like this, sharing her success with someone who had believed in her all along, that truly made the journey worthwhile. "We did it," she corrected, standing up to greet him. "You've been there for me every step of the way." Travis chuckled and shook his head. "You did the hard part. I just pointed you in the right direction." But Jasmine knew better. It was Travis who had always pushed her when she needed it, who had seen her potential even when she couldn't see it herself. Without him, she might still be stuck in the life she had left behind, unsure of who she was or where she was going. "What's next for you?" Travis asked, his eyes twinkling with curiosity. Jasmine paused for a moment, contemplating his question. There had been a time when she had worried about what came next, about what would happen after she had rebuilt her life, after she had proven herself. But now, she realized, the answer was simple. "What's next is everything I've ever wanted," she said, her voice steady and confident. "It's time to make my mark on the world, to build something that's truly mine." Travis raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Like what?" "Like a company that reflects who I am," she replied, a spark of excitement in her eyes. "A place where success is defined by more than just profits. A place where people thrive, not just work. I want to create something that lasts." The words felt good to say, and as she said them, Jasmine realized that she wasn't just talking about a business venture. She was talking about her legacy, something that would be a reflection of everything she had overcome, everything she had achieved. It wasn't just about success, it was about purpose. Travis nodded, clearly impressed by her vision. "I think that sounds like a great plan, and you're the person to make it happen." Jasmine smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. He was right. She had everything she needed: drive, ambition, and the confidence to follow through on her dreams. The future wasn't just something to be hoped for anymore. It was something to be shaped, molded, and built with her own hands. Later that night, as Jasmine stood by the window of her apartment, looking out over the city, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The lights twinkling in the distance seemed to mirror her own journey, bright, full of possibility, and endless. She wasn't just part of the world anymore. She was shaping it. She had become the woman she had always dreamed of being. And as she watched the city pulse with life, she knew that this was only the beginning. The world was hers for the taking, and she was ready to embrace everything that came with it. She had created her own future, and there was no stopping her now. The days continued to slip by, and as Jasmine grew deeper into her new life, she couldn't help but feel that everything she had worked for was coming to fruition. Her company had taken off in ways she hadn't expected, and the dream she had spoken of just months ago was now a reality. She had created a space where people didn't just work, they thrived. And in the process, Jasmine had found something far more valuable than success: fulfillment. The office that once felt like just a workplace had transformed into a community, a place where everyone, from the interns to the executives, felt supported and valued. Jasmine had made it her mission to create an environment where people were more than their job titles, where their ambitions and dreams were respected. She had come to realize that this was her legacy. She had built something that could last, something that was more than just a reflection of her own success. It was a place for others to grow, to shine. But even as she basked in the satisfaction of her accomplishments, there was still a part of her that wondered if this was enough. She had always been driven, always striving for something bigger, better, more. And yet, now that she had achieved so much, there was a strange sense of quiet in her heart. She had everything she had once dreamed of: a successful career, a home filled with love, and the confidence that had come from the battles she had fought and won. But, somewhere deep inside, she still wondered if there was more. It was on one of those reflective mornings, as Jasmine sipped her coffee in her office, that the answer came to her. She didn't need more. She had already created everything she needed. What had once felt like an insatiable hunger for success, for validation, had been replaced with a deep sense of peace. She didn't need to keep pushing herself into new territories just for the sake of it. Jasmine had already conquered the hardest part: believing in herself. The rest, she knew, would follow naturally. Her phone buzzed on the desk, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Travis. "It's time for a celebration. You've earned it." Jasmine smiled and typed a quick response. "I think you're right." She had spent so much time working, so much energy focused on building her empire, that she had forgotten to take a step back and acknowledge how far she had come. She wasn't just living her dream, she was living in it. The party was intimate, but meaningful. It wasn't about grand gestures or impressive displays. It was a gathering of those who had been there for her from the start: Travis, her closest friends, the team she had built from the ground up. As the evening unfolded, Jasmine felt a sense of gratitude fill her heart. She wasn't alone in this journey. She had built this life with people who supported her, who believed in her, even when she didn't believe in herself. And in that moment, surrounded by those who mattered most, Jasmine realized that the most important thing was never the success or the recognition. It was the people who shared the journey with her. She had come so far, and it wasn't just about the milestones she had reached. It was about the relationships she had nurtured along the way. She had learned that success wasn't just about what you accomplished, but about who you became in the process. As the night drew to a close, Jasmine stood on the balcony of her office, looking out at the city below. It was a perfect view, the skyline stretching out before her. But it wasn't just the view of the city that filled her with pride. It was the life she had built. A life that was hers, a life she had created on her own terms. For the first time in a long while, Jasmine felt at peace. She had found everything she had been searching for, not in the world, but within herself. And with that realization, she knew that whatever came next, she was ready. She had already conquered the hardest part of the journey, believing in herself, and now, the world was hers for the taking. As the days passed, Jasmine felt the steady pulse of her life moving forward. The quiet peace she had been craving for so long was now a constant companion. Her business was thriving, and more importantly, she had found a sense of self that was rooted in something far deeper than professional success. The city, once a sprawling unknown filled with opportunities, now felt like a home, a place she had carved out for herself and her twins. Her children were flourishing too, their laughter a constant reminder of the love and resilience she had built within their home. Jasmine had spent so many years focused on others, trying to meet their expectations, especially Jonathan's. Now, she was living for herself. For the first time, she was not just a wife, a mother, or an employee. She was Jasmine Williams, a woman who had found her strength and her voice. Her work was no longer just a means to an end. It was a reflection of who she had become. Every decision she made now carried a sense of purpose, not just for the company, but for the future she wanted to create. As she sat in her office one evening, reviewing the latest numbers from her projects, Jasmine realized that she was in complete control of her destiny. The fear that once held her back had dissipated, replaced by a quiet confidence that came from within. There was no need to look back anymore. The past had shaped her, yes, but it no longer defined her. The future was hers to write. That night, Jasmine found herself on the phone with Travis, discussing her plans for the next big move. She had always trusted his judgment, and his support had been unwavering throughout her journey. "You've come so far," he said, his voice filled with pride. "But I know you're just getting started." Jasmine smiled softly. She had heard those words from him many times before, but this time, they felt different. This time, she believed them with every fiber of her being. She had spent years questioning herself, doubting her worth, but now, that doubt had been replaced with certainty. There was nothing she couldn't accomplish. She didn't need Jonathan or anyone else to validate her success. She had already proven it to herself. The next day, as she prepared for another high-stakes meeting, Jasmine felt the familiar rush of anticipation, but this time, it was different. She wasn't walking into the room as a woman seeking approval. She was walking in as someone who had already earned her place. The meeting was a turning point, not just for the business, but for Jasmine personally. She stood tall, her voice steady as she presented her vision, guiding the conversation with a clarity and confidence that left her colleagues in awe. It was a moment that confirmed what she had always known deep down. She was meant for this. As the meeting wrapped up and Jasmine left the conference room, she couldn't help but smile to herself. She had done it. She had taken her life back, not just in business, but in every aspect of who she was. Her success was no longer measured by the standards of others, but by the fulfillment she felt in her own heart. Later that evening, Jasmine sat with her twins, watching them play as the sun set outside their window. The life she had built was no longer about surviving. It was about living fully, with purpose and joy. She had reclaimed everything that had once been taken from her. As she looked at her children, Jasmine knew that they were the true reflection of her strength, her resilience, and her love. She had fought for them, and in doing so, she had fought for herself. Together, they were creating a future that was limitless. And as she gazed out at the city below, Jasmine finally realized that she wasn't just dreaming of her future. She was living it every single day. As the months passed, Jasmine continued to thrive in ways she had never thought possible. Her company had expanded, her influence in the business world was undeniable, and the support she had gathered along the way solidified her place at the top. It wasn't just about the numbers, though. Her achievements were personal milestones that marked the beginning of a new era in her life. Every step she took now was a reflection of the strength and resilience she had discovered in herself. She was no longer just a woman who had rebuilt her life after a painful divorce. She was a woman who had found her voice and had become a force in her own right. As the city buzzed around her, Jasmine found herself standing at the precipice of something even greater. The world was at her feet, and for the first time in years, she felt ready for whatever came next. The quiet mornings with her twins, their laughter filling the apartment, had become her sanctuary. They were her greatest joy, her reason for pushing forward every day. Watching them grow and develop into confident, strong individuals reminded her of her own journey and how far she had come. But there was still an ache, a yearning for something more. She had created a life that was full of success, but she had also created space for the one thing she had missed in the past: real, meaningful connections. Her relationships had been so tied to her past, to the idea of pleasing others. But now Jasmine understood the value of building a life that wasn't based on validation from anyone but herself. She had started to connect with new people who shared her values, who supported her not for what she could do for them, but for who she was. And as these new friendships blossomed, Jasmine began to realize that while she had built a life on her own, she didn't have to do it alone. One afternoon, as Jasmine sat in her office preparing for a meeting, she received a call from an unexpected source. It was Jonathan. For the first time since their divorce, he was reaching out to her. She hesitated, unsure of how she felt about this sudden contact. Was it curiosity, regret, or perhaps an attempt to reconnect? Jasmine answered the call, her voice steady as always. "Jasmine, I know this is out of the blue, Jonathan began, his tone cautious. I just wanted to say, I've been thinking a lot about what happened. I know I can never undo what I did, but I want you to know that I regret how things turned out. I see now that I took you for granted. And for that, I'm sorry. Jasmine paused, listening carefully. She had come so far, had worked so hard to get to where she was. The pain of their past was still there, but it no longer defined her. She had let go of the need for closure from him, from anyone. She had already found it within herself. Jonathan, she replied, her voice calm but firm. I appreciate your apology, but I'm not the same woman you once knew. I've grown. I've learned to stand on my own, and I no longer need anything from you to feel complete. The silence on the other end was heavy, but Jasmine didn't falter. She had long since made peace with the past, and there was no place for regret in her heart anymore. Jonathan's voice softened, and for the first time in years, she could hear a trace of vulnerability in his words. I understand, and I respect that. I just wanted you to know that you're doing well. I'm proud of what you've achieved. Jasmine let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. Thank you, Jonathan. But I've moved on. I've found my own path, and I'm walking it now. The conversation ended with no further words, but it didn't matter. Jasmine had said what needed to be said, and for the first time in a long while, she felt nothing but peace. She had built her life from the ground up, and she didn't need validation from anyone else. As the days turned into weeks, Jasmine's company continued to grow, but it was the relationships she had cultivated along the way that brought her the most fulfillment. She had learned to trust herself completely, to build something not just with her mind, but with her heart. And that was the true measure of her success. She was no longer searching for something. She was living the life she had created, fully and completely, with nothing and no one holding her back. Months passed, and Jasmine's life continued to evolve in ways that she had once only dreamed of. Her business was thriving, her relationships were deeper and more meaningful than ever, and her personal growth was undeniable. She had become the woman she had always hoped she could be, a woman who stood firm in her beliefs, who trusted herself fully, and who had learned to embrace the beauty of both success and failure. The twin boys, now more than just the joy of her life, were growing into young individuals with personalities that matched her ambition and drive. They were a reflection of the love and strength she had fought to create in their home. But as Jasmine's life settled into this new rhythm, there was something that tugged at her heart. She had spent so many years focusing on work, on rebuilding her career, and on ensuring her children's happiness that she hadn't taken time to focus on herself, on her own desires and aspirations outside of being a mother and a businesswoman. One afternoon, while reviewing a new project proposal, Jasmine found herself lost in thought. It was a brief moment of stillness, but it felt like the calm before a storm. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished surface of the conference room table. It was a look she didn't recognize. The woman who had once been so uncertain of her worth now sat with her accomplishments. But there was a sense of yearning in her eyes. She had everything she thought she wanted, yet something was missing, a connection to the deeper parts of herself that she had pushed aside. It was in that moment that Jasmine realized she had to give herself the freedom to grow in new ways, beyond what she had already achieved. The next morning, she took a deep breath as she sat at her desk. She was ready to expand her horizons. It was time to reconnect with the things that made her feel alive, to nourish the parts of herself that had been neglected for so long. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone anymore. It was about exploring the things that brought her joy, her passion, her purpose. With this new intention in mind, Jasmine decided to take a step that she had always wanted to but never had the time for: travel. She had spent years building her empire, raising her children, and supporting her business, but now, she was ready to experience the world on her own terms. For the first time in a long while, Jasmine felt a sense of excitement about what lay ahead. She began planning a trip to Europe, a place she had always dreamed of visiting but had never had the chance to. It wasn't about escaping her life. It was about embracing it in a new way, experiencing the world from a perspective she had never allowed herself. As the days passed, Jasmine felt a growing sense of liberation. She was no longer tied to the relentless demands of work or the pressure she had placed on herself. She was doing something for herself, and the anticipation was like a spark that lit up every part of her being. When the day of her departure arrived, Jasmine stood at the airport with a sense of freedom she had never known. The world was vast, and for the first time, it felt full of possibilities. She wasn't just a businesswoman or a mother. She was a woman on a journey to rediscover herself, to reconnect with the world in a way that was meaningful to her. The flight was long, but Jasmine couldn't wait to explore the places she had dreamed of for so long. She spent the days in Paris, the streets bustling with life, and in Venice, where the canals whispered stories of centuries past. Every experience felt like a gift, a chance for her to reclaim the joy and wonder she had missed in the years of sacrifice. And as the days passed, Jasmine realized that the missing piece she had felt was no longer a void. It was an opening, a chance to embrace the fullness of life. She had been so focused on achieving success that she had forgotten to stop and enjoy the beauty of the journey. Now, as she walked along the streets of Rome, her heart felt lighter. She wasn't searching for anything. She was simply living, fully present in the moment, fully herself. When Jasmine returned home, she felt different, changed in ways she couldn't fully describe. The work still needed her attention, her children still relied on her, but there was a new energy in her life now, one that came from a place of self-awareness and self-love. She had taken the time to step away from everything, to reconnect with her soul, and it had reignited her passion for everything she did. Jasmine knew that the future held many challenges, but now, she was ready to meet them with open arms, with the knowledge that she had everything she needed within herself. She was not just a woman who had conquered her past. She was a woman who was fully alive in the present, and the future was wide open for her. As Jasmine settled back into her routine, there was a quiet confidence in her step. The world that once seemed so overwhelming, full of obstacles and challenges, had transformed into a space of endless opportunity. Her journey, from the struggles of her past to the triumphs of her present, had been nothing short of remarkable. Yet, even with everything she had achieved, there was still a sense of anticipation within her. She had proven herself in ways she never thought possible, but Jasmine knew deep down that her story was far from over. It wasn't just about success or recognition anymore. It was about continuing to evolve and embracing the ever-changing nature of her life. It was about fully stepping into the life she had built, not only for herself but for her children, who continued to grow into young individuals with their own dreams and aspirations. They were her constant reminder of why she fought so hard to reclaim her happiness and independence. One morning, as she watched her twins play in the yard, their laughter echoing through the air, Jasmine felt a deep sense of gratitude. The peace she had found was not just external. It was within her, a quiet strength that had been hard-won but was now unshakable. She had learned that happiness wasn't something that was given to her. It was something she had created, brick by brick, with her own hands. The foundation she had laid was solid, but Jasmine wasn't done yet. There was still more she wanted to do, more she wanted to experience. Her journey of self-discovery wasn't confined to the walls of her office or the boundaries of her city. It was a lifelong pursuit, one that required her to remain open to new experiences, new relationships, and new possibilities. Jasmine knew that life was about the pursuit of growth and the willingness to face whatever came next with courage and grace. As she sat down to plan the next phase of her business, her thoughts drifted to her travels. Those moments when she had allowed herself to simply live, to step away from the daily grind and embrace the world around her. It had changed her. It had reminded her that there was more to life than just work and responsibility. It was about embracing the adventure, taking risks, and finding joy in the unexpected. Her heart swelled with excitement as she thought about the opportunities that lay ahead. She was no longer limited by fear, by doubt, or by the weight of her past. Jasmine had learned to trust herself completely. She had learned to trust the process, knowing that every challenge she faced was an opportunity for growth. The future was no longer something to be feared. It was something to be embraced, with open arms and an open heart. That afternoon, Jasmine received a message that further fueled her excitement. It was from one of her business partners, presenting an opportunity to expand the company internationally. It was everything she had worked for, an opportunity to take her vision beyond the borders of the city, beyond the borders of her comfort zone. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Jasmine had spent so much of her life playing it safe, staying within the limits of what she knew. But now, she was ready for more. She had built her life from the ground up, and it was time to take it to the next level. She immediately called her team to discuss the details, her heart racing with anticipation. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. The world was ready for her, and she was ready for the world. Jasmine knew that this was just the beginning of an exciting new chapter. The growth she had experienced, both personally and professionally, was just the start. She was now a woman who was no longer defined by the past, but by the endless possibilities of the future. And with that realization, Jasmine stepped confidently into the next phase of her life, ready to embrace whatever came her way. She had already overcome so much, and now, there was nothing she couldn't achieve. The world was hers for the taking.